live out here at the Jeff Davis Monument. It is extremely chaotic right now.
We cannot have reconciliation without truth. We have intentionally misrepresented this history to our own citizens on purpose.
These people who are really bigoted, I bet we could just change their minds.
We're back with a new film from the minds behind The Daily Show, looking at the persistent fight over removal of Confederate monuments. The Neutral Ground, premiering July 5th on PBS from director C.J. Hunt, examines why the myths of the lost cause and a morally noble Confederacy continues to be points of discussion rather than objects of ridicule. And C.J. Hunt joins us now. Thank you, Mr. Hunt, for joining us tonight. Can you explain for our audience what was happening in New Orleans in 2015 when this project began and why it was the catalyst for your film, The Neutral Ground?
Irvin, Chuck, and thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I also appreciate you leaving on a trailer of my dad laughing in my face. I moved to New Orleans in 2007 to become a teacher. And by 2015, I was doing a lot of comedy writing. And for me, comedy is just sort of a coping mechanism for figuring out how to put voice around the things I find really crazy and upsetting. And as you remember, in 2015, the most crazy thing, the most upsetting thing, one of the most, was how hard some white people in America were holding on to symbols of the Confederacy. Even after a murderer massacred 9 Black people in a church in Charleston,
Right.
Even after Bree Newsom climbed up on that pole to pull that flag down, you still had lawmakers saying, this is our heritage, this belongs above the Capitol. So as activists were marching in New Orleans to remove those symbols, and the mayor heard that call and went to remove them, you had folks coming to city council pretending that moving a monument across town was the apocalypse.
Yeah.
So I brought a camera to try to capture that.
Now, as I'm viewing your film, I'm wondering how much has the mainstreaming of the Confederacy and mythology of the lost cause has played a role in the last 5 years, leading into the insurrection. Because even before Trump, several states incorporated Confederate symbols into their flags, into their license plates. And I'm old enough to remember a show called The Dukes of Hazzard, where the car was a big Confederate flag called the
General Lee.
Yeah,
General Lee.
that isn't a statue, it's popular culture, and it's tolerated culturally. In a way, the swastika isn't. Why is that?
No. You know, first of all, RIP to General Lee, both the car and the statue. But also, you know, even your sentence is absurd. Even the fact that we have to say, now before this last insurrection, you know, there was tolerance of the first insurrection. Like, that is just the craziness around the Confederacy. You can't name another war where we have statues, thousands of statues, to a losing army, right? You can't name another war where we judge the cause of the war, not by the many founding documents they had, but by what was in the heart of some soldier and what Lee wrote to his wife. And that's just the absurdity of the Confederacy. This is the oldest propaganda campaign in American history. Well, second oldest to Columbus discovered America. But as we have seen with the Trump administration, you know, we witnessed a big lie be born in our time. We know what it is like to have someone say what you saw with your eyes didn't happen. It was something else. They weren't insurrectionists, they were patriots. So the South wrote that story into our landscape right after the war, and it has stuck around so long, we can't even recognize insurrectionists now.
Wow. Now, I want to play for our audience because I got such a kick out of it. You and a group of reenactors and a history lesson role. A history lesson. Roll this, please.
Throughout history, why have white supremacists always been attracted to the Confederacy? Rebel.
Rebels.
Just that word right there, rebel.
Everybody wants to be a rebel.
So you think white supremacists from KKK forward have been attracted to the Confederacy not because of slavery?
It's because of the word rebel.
Yeah.
That's it. But
I've been seeing it wrong.
But it's a black and white
That makes
issue.
sense.
I don't care
That's
how,
all it is.
I don't
Just
care
the
how you
word.
go, it's a black and white issue.
What, the KKK?
Now, in the course of your production, were you ever convinced that anyone still willing to fight and die over the Confederate statue or distort that history as noble could legitimately not be racist?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, people are willing to fight and die over these things. Those who are in New Orleans, remember folks who are not from there coming with AR-15s. You see the footage and standing in the neutral ground saying that they are going to die for that statue. People forget that Charlottesville was inspired by white supremacists going there to try to stop the city council from removing a Robert E. Lee monument. So yes, people are out there trying to fight and die for these. As to whether it's possible to somehow do that without being racist, I will say I have empathy for folks who have not questioned the story they grew up with. Right? I grew up in Boston where we're like, let's all go to Plymouth Plantation and talk about the Pilgrims. I don't think it's a question of whether you grew up with a lie. I think the question is, once in 2020, you are being confronted with the fact that this is not true, that this story emboldens racist murder. Do you have the moral courage to look back and say, oh, I guess that doesn't make sense. I guess that is not true. And if you do not have that moral courage, then yeah, I do think that is racism.
All right, well, thank you for being here, CJ Hunt. The Neutral Ground airs July 5th on POV at 9:30 p.m. Up next,